attorney and the executive director of Right on Crime, Brett Tolman. Quite a powerful panel of legal minds, folks. And let's weigh in on this. I mean, Jenna, first to you. Joe Manchin sounds a lot like a conservative Republican, but he's right. I mean, this is the issue that we've talked about, and which is so important and what's fundamental to this issue of Roe v. Wade. It's about federalism, and you can't have a law that wipes off 500 state laws from the books.
Yeah, Joe Manchin is absolutely correct. And every conservative and American who cares about the Constitution and cares about limited powers of government would agree with Joe Manchin, regardless of whether you're a Democrat or Republican, or regardless of whether you support abortion or are pro-life. Congress cannot exercise power to codify Roe because the Constitution simply does not give the federal legislature that power. It has to be returned to the states, and that's exactly what Justice Alito's majority draft opinion articulated so very well. And so this is not about codifying Roe versus Wade. This is about making sure that federalism is still the law of the land and that the U.S. Constitution is still the law of the land. And hopefully when that majority opinion does get pushed out as the actual opinion, then as the states take up these issues, the fight for pro-life and the right to life is now going to be in all 50 states.
It is definitely happening right before our very eyes. Brett, you know, we also have to talk about the security issue for the justices. The DOJ now enlisting the U.S. Marshals Service to boost SCOTUS security. But why are they not putting a stop to these protests, considering this is actually codified into law? And it seems like a lot of these protesters are violating that law.
They're not doing enough, John. This is clearly a mistake by the Attorney General and the Department of Justice. And it makes you wonder about, you know, it's consistent with their lack of condemnation of the leak itself. But there's a statute, Section 1507, that is exactly as you pointed out. It's on point, and it is supposed to be used because any protesting of a judge runs the risk of applying mob rule and pressure to a judge to reach a decision rather than the facts and the law that apply. And that's the danger here. Is it's not only the safety of the judges, but this isn't about whether the protests are violent or not. It's about whether they can be done under law, and they cannot.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, I mean, to hear the White House press secretary advocate for this type of intimidation against our Supreme Court justices, that is concerning as well, isn't it?
Well, it is. I think if you're the Department of Justice, you should be threatening to have a grand jury subpoena issued to find out the communications between those in the White House and you know, those that may be leading these groups, because right now we don't have confidence that this isn't an orchestrated leak and response from the administration.
Yeah, well, Josh Gersten, Jenna, who is a senior legal affairs reporter for Politico and one of the two reporters who obtained the SCOTUS draft overturning Roe v. Wade, he is now questioning whether Chief Justice John Roberts actually has the legal authority to order his fellow justices and their clerks to cooperate in the leak investigations. Is there any, does this hold water at all, Jenna, what Josh Gersten is saying here?
Right. Well, I haven't read that particular piece, but in terms of the canons of judicial ethics and the responsibility that the justices and also the law clerks have under their the rules of professional responsibility, I think that that's very important here. That Chief Justice Roberts, of course, with his leadership on the court, can certainly direct an internal investigation and ask the associate justices to cooperate here. And certainly for the law clerks, I would imagine that each of the associate justices, if they want to get to the bottom of this and they hold the secrecy and the work of the court to a higher standard, and they understand, which I believe that they do, how really unethical and unprecedented this leak was, they're going to want to get to the bottom of it, and they'll conduct an internal investigation among their own clerks and their own staff. But I think that Brett is also right that the DOJ here really does need to step in, not just for the protests, but also in terms of this leak, and also consider whether or not there were any other elements that violate federal law, but certainly with law clerks who are barred. They are licensed. You know, this could ultimately result in disbarment if and when the leaker is found.
So disbarment, Brett, but is there anything criminal here as it relates to this leak of the memo?
Yeah, it's tough to tell. That's why I advocate for a special prosecutor to be appointed so that they investigate the issue and then give them the authority to utilize the subpoena power. The court may not like that, but they can put on their big boy and girl pants and they can deal with the fact because it's their institution that's at risk here. And the aftermath has to be swift and the investigation thorough. And we have to know what the justification for the leak was. It's not going to be enough to threaten termination of a law clerk or to orders them to cooperate, because each separate justice will have authority to either cooperate or not cooperate in an investigation that John Roberts might lead. Instead, they need somebody that has the ability to come in, to grab documents, to go into the IT department, to be able to seize hard drives. It sounds, awful if you're in the Supreme Court, but it's necessary, or else you're going to have the risk of these leaks into the future.
I mean, given the implications of this, Jenna, and Brett, feel free to chime in after we get a response from Jenna here, but I would think the transparency of the due process of this investigation is tantamount, because otherwise, if we don't get to the bottom of this and there's not a thorough investigation here and a resolution to this, Jenna, the credibility of the court will forever be in jeopardy.
Well, yeah, that's why justice is required here, and that's why accountability is also required, because if the leaker gets away with this, then certainly we will likely see more partisan political acts within the court rather than having the integrity of the judicial branch and the Supreme Court preserved. And that's why these protests also are so troubling, because even with Jim Jordan's tweet yesterday saying, imagine if Justice Sotomayor was protested outside of her home, how would the leftists respond? And most of the responses to that were surprising, saying, well, Justice Sotomayor hasn't done anything to warrant protests. Well, that's in their opinion. That's totally missing the point. The point is that there should never be a threat or an intimidation of a sitting Supreme Court justice or any sitting judge on any level, because they are supposed to be insulated from mob rule, from politics, and be an independent arbiter that is free to rule according to the law. So this absolutely has to be taken care of, not only the leak, but also the protests.
And I'd add,
and that's why go ahead, Brett.
This is A.G. Garland's moment in history. He's either going to step up and do the right thing for purposes of the transparency that this country needs, or he's going to further divide the country.
Yeah,
exactly right.
The country's certainly divided right now on that. Guys, great to see you both, and great insight from both of you. Look forward to